You are standing on a riverbank in northern England after 3 days of rain. The water is brown. It is moving fast. It is moving wrong. In 2013 and 2015, floods like this cost Britain £4 billion. £4 billion in 2 years. Gone. Homes destroyed. Businesses closed. Farmland buried under silt. Now, here is what most people miss about those floods. The water did not have to move that fast downstream. I have spent the last 19 years studying how to slow it before it destroys. My father worked riparian restoration before me. He taught me to read a waterway like text. I want to show you exactly how one animal stops this. Not concrete barriers, not pumps, not millions in engineering. One animal, 4 feet long, nocturnal, and expelled from Britain 400 years ago. By the end of this chapter, you will understand the mechanism that saves billions. You will see how a single dam holds back a storm. And near the end, I will show you the part that changes how you see every river in this country. Stay with me for that one. Right now, I need you to understand the dam itself. A beaver builds across a small stream using branches, mud, and stone. The dam is not solid. Water still flows through it, but the water slows. Studies from Devon show 30% slower velocity during storm events. Slower water drops its sediment. Sediment builds the pond. One beaver family builds not one dam, but 5, 6, sometimes 8, a staircase of ponds. Each pond holds hundreds of thousands of liters. That water soaks sideways into the soil, saturating the floodplain like a sponge being filled. Soil that is already wet cannot absorb more rain. So the peak surge that would have rushed downstream instead spreads, lingers, seeps. The river, for the first time in 4 centuries, remembers how to breathe. But beavers were not always gone from Britain. They engineered these valleys for 10,000 years before we hunted them out. That is the story I need to tell you next. Because understanding why they vanished is the only way to understand why bringing them back changes everything. So, beavers built that staircase of dams for 10,000 years across Britain, until we decided they had to go. In the 12th century, a monk named Gerald of Wales walked along the River Teifi and wrote down what he saw. He found beavers there, but he marked them as rare, already unusual enough to mention in a journal. By his time, the animal was almost gone from Wales, and from England, it had vanished centuries before. Here is why we hunted them so deliberately. Beaver fur is not ordinary fur. The underfur is dense, barbed, almost scaled. It mats together into felt more perfectly than any material Europe had ever found. A single beaver pelt became the raw material for a felt hat worn by merchants, nobles, anyone who could afford status. From the 1300s onward, the demand for those hats climbed relentlessly across Europe. Beaver fur meant money, and Britain's rivers held the animal. But it was not only the fur trade that sealed them. Medieval physicians prized a secretion from inside the beaver's scent glands. We call it castoreum. They believed it cured headaches, fevers, even the plague. Perfumers bought it to fix scent in expensive oils and waters. So the beaver was worth hunting for 3 separate reasons: the pelt, the oil, the meat. 3 prices on one animal. By the 13th century, English beavers were gone, hunted out across the lowlands. Scotland held them longer. Scottish law in the 1100s even set a price on beaver skins, which means they were still worth catching. But by 1526, perhaps 1527, the records blur a little here. Scottish historians wrote about them as if they were already memory. Within 400 years, a species that had engineered every British river for millennia had vanished. And here is the part that haunts me. Nobody really noticed. No outcry, no attempt to protect a breeding population, no second thought. The rivers simply lost their engineer, and nobody marked what was missing until the floods came. Now, when you restore a beaver to a river, you are not introducing something new to Britain. You are returning something that shaped this entire landscape before we arrived. And that changes everything about what happens next. So, Britain's rivers stand empty of their engineer. But watch what happens the moment one family arrives. You are standing at a small stream in Devon in spring 2016. The river otter, a mated pair, and 2 juveniles. That is your entire work crew. Within weeks, they drag branches into the current and begin to weave. The dam is not random. They hear running water and they build against it. Now, here is where most people miss the mechanism entirely. The dam does not stop water. It slows it down. Slow water cannot carry silt. The particles drop and settle. At the River Otter site, 13 dams rose in a monitored stretch within months. Each one raised the water table measurably, 30 to 50 centimeters in the immediate vicinity. Water that once rushed downstream now spread sideways across the floodplain. That lateral spread is the flood-stopping moment. That is the work. During a storm event, those 13 dams together stored millions of liters of water. The water released slowly, over days, not hours. Peak flood flows downstream reduced by up to 30%. 30%. In a small catchment, that difference saves houses. Now, watch the secondary chain, because one family does not simply flood a floodplain. Silt trapped behind the dams filters the water. Nitrogen and phosphorus settle out. Agricultural poison moving downstream, slowed, trapped, cleaned before it poisons the sea. The still water that forms creates habitat almost absent from modern British rivers. Dragonflies, damselflies, water beetles colonize in months. Newts follow. Amphibians return. The willow and alder that beavers fell do not die. They coppice, sprout fresh shoots. Dense, shrubby margins rise where bare banks stood. Nesting cover for reed warblers, sedge warblers. Fallen trees, left half submerged, become large woody debris. Brown trout shelter there. Salmon spawn there. The mosaic spreads. Open water, wet grassland, fen, scrub. The richest habitat type Britain has lost. One family, one dam complex. The biodiversity that follows cascades downstream. Fish feed herons and egrets. Egrets feed otters already returning to these rivers. But here is what the landowners and councils notice first: the reduced flood risk. Water storage that costs millions to engineer and concrete, built and maintained by the beavers themselves. And that raises the question that changes everything about how we spend on rivers. What if we stopped building concrete defenses and started letting the engineer work for us? With those 13 dams holding water across the floodplain, the cost of that system was almost nothing. The beavers built it themselves. Now here is where the secret lives, and I promised you this one. You are standing in front of a council office, looking at a flood defense budget proposal. Concrete, steel, pumps, dredging, maintenance contracts stretching 30 years into the future. The bill reads £5 million to protect one town. That same town, 50 kilometers upstream in the hills, could have paid £30,000 to support a single beaver family instead. The math does not lie, and the Environment Agency knows it. After the winter of 2015 and 2016, when 3 storms in quick succession smashed the south of England and cost $1.6 billion in losses, something shifted. Hard engineering alone had failed. Concrete walls do one thing. They move water faster downstream, away from one town and onto the next. I have seen this on 5 rivers now. You solve the problem here. You create the problem there. But a beaver dam slows the water at source, in the hills where rainfall first collides with the land. That water does not accelerate. It spreads. It soaks. And here is what most people miss. Beavers do this for free, forever, and they improve everything else while they work. One family raises the water table. 50 families across a catchment re-wet an entire landscape. Fish return. Birds return. Wetland plants return. Water quality filters upward. Carbon locks into peat. The ground holds moisture through summer drought and absorbs winter deluge in the same month. A concrete pump costs $3 million to build and $200,000 a year to run, and it only works during a flood. A beaver family costs nothing to run and works every single day on everything. That is why Scotland protected them in law in 2019. That is why Devon granted them permanent residency. That is why England is moving to do the same. Now, the next time you walk a river and see a fallen tree, a tangle of branches, a pond where none was before, pause. Look at that water spreading sideways into the floodplain. That is not damage. That is a system that learned to heal itself 400 years ago. What has changed in how you see your local river after understanding this? I read every message you send.